Hello, welcome to our show, Ghosts Are Near, where we discuss and actively explore paranormal phenomena. I am your host, Keith Johnson, the co-founder of New England Anomalies Research. And my co-founder, Sandra, she actually is with us today. She's in the control booth. She's a trooper, and I want to thank everyone for their prayers and concerns for her. As many of you know, she recently suffered a fall down a flight of stairs, and thankfully, she didn't break anything, and she's in great spirits, and we do want to thank you for all your prayers and well wishes. The only thing that's bothering her is her back, and she's not in pain as long as she doesn't sit, stand, or walk. So, so I've been trying to help out around the house as much as possible, but we do thank you for all your well wishes and prayers. And today we have a wonderful guest with us, a dear friend for many years actually, and fellow investigator, Mr. Wayne Nye, and he is the founder and director of Massachusetts Area Paranormal Society, also known as M.A.P.S. And he has recently published the book, Faces in the Window, East Bridgewater, Mass. And this is a delightful, delightful book. He was kind enough to mention us in it as well. So we've been friends for many years. And so I'd like you all to please welcome Mr. Wayne Nye.
Thank you.
Well,
thank you for having me.
Great to have you. Great to have you. So what prompted you to write a book? I guess so many experiences over the years.
In the old Masonic building in East Bridgewater, where my friend Lori Parker has her antique business, back in 2006 when she moved in, she realized that there were other things going on there besides her physical customers. There were also ghostly things going on there in the shop, and that's where the title of the book came from, Faces in the Window.
Right. Now, what is it about Masonic halls that seem to be haunted or have paranormal phenomena?
Well, a lot of people, and this isn't my quote, say that a lot of people say it was an evil organization. I know a lot of Freemasons myself, and some of my family members were also members of this particular lodge, Setauket Lodge in East Bridgewater, who this building was built for specifically. But they said some of the things that they did back in the early days were kind of not of the ordinary, and a lot of the energies were left behind, which stirs things up. And we actually investigated this building, and it was quite a creepy investigation.
So you did come away with some evidence from there?
Yes, we did.
Wow. And becoming part of the village, what about that?
That is when I first started going into East Bridgewater, going to all the antique shops, particularly Mrs. Swift's and Moore's, and I started to meet all the different people in the surrounding businesses and neighborhood and becoming friends with them, which I'm still friends with today. I still continue to go there since my beginning there back in 2006.
Oh, great. Fantastic. Now, we have to know about the Undertakers.
The Undertakers, I was startled when I uncovered that. Once Lori told me about two girls who took pictures through the front window and actually have about 50 faces pressed up against that very window right there on the cover. I started doing research on the building and found out that there were two undertakers actually in the building in the shop where she is located now. So that chapter explains about the undertakers that were there, and one of them in particular, David Ross Drake, who actually was kind of mysterious. He was an undertaker in several towns here in Massachusetts, and then he just disappeared, and I located him in La Crosse, Wisconsin. But each year, the undertaker and the address and for the undertakers and his residence were at a different location, like he was running from something.
Oh, I see.
So he's very peculiar. I actually this year obtained his original sign that hung on the front of the building from someone who saw our ghost tour online, and we posted a picture of the undertaker, and I actually purchased his original sign this year.
Interesting that a place of the Undertakers would actually be haunted.
Well, a few of the psychics that have come to the building said there were actually acts of violence and murder in that location in the building where the Undertakers were located.
Wow.
So that was pretty interesting.
Okay, being an expert New Englander, what would you say is the reason that so many places in New England seem to have this history and paranormal phenomena taking place, and everybody has a ghost story per se, but what would you say is attributed to that?
Well, I know a lot of people attribute it to King Philip's War.
Oh, yes, yes.
With the Native Americans being angry about the deal between the colonists and the Indians regarding the land. So I think a lot of the energies over time get left behind, and for one reason or another, either they're disturbed or duplicated in some manner, and it stirs up the energy, so there's paranormal activity.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize that was actually the bloodiest war in our history, in our entire history. It was before the United States of America, of course.
Yes.
The colonial age, but yeah, very, very tragic, very tragic. Now, the candle experiment. What goes on in the candle experiment?
That, we tried an experiment with antique dolls. We found an old window shade above Lori's ceiling in her shop. There's suspended ceilings, and one day I moved one of them, and there was all kinds of stuff above the ceiling in a little storage area. So we found a big green shade, and we used to hang it in the back hall near the doorway. That it was once a double doorway, and they made it a single door. And I would put the antique dolls there and light a candle in front of them and sit there and ask questions and mention things about the history of the building. And the candle would be burning regular, then it would start flickering, and I'd feel a cold breeze, so I'd snap photos. And when I look at the viewfinder, you could see these other figures aside from the dolls that were sitting there in the photos. So there's several photos in that chapter, chapter 7, with these, and they look pretty creepy figures, which were captured in the heat trace from the candle.
Ah, oh, very, very interesting, very interesting. Now, the unexpected visitor, what goes on there?
I had 2 friends visit me at the shop one Sunday. I usually open the shop for Lori on Sundays. And 2 of my friends from work, boyfriend and girlfriend, Joe and Jane, stopped by to visit me, and they had never been there before, so I was telling them about the history of the building. And that week, Lori had scheduled a psychic medium to do a show upstairs in the building for Valentine's week, and they were supposed to go, as they had never been to a psychic, and unfortunately Joe was killed by a train.
Oh, dear.
So they did not make the show, and that day Lori and I were upstairs on the 2nd floor of the building getting ready for the show. She went back downstairs, and I lit a candle in this long corridor, and I knelt down and I was taking pictures. Well, something came down the hall, which I couldn't see, hit my right shoulder and knocked me backwards, and the camera went flying.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, what the heck was that? So I picked the camera up and looked at the viewfinder. There was a large purple orb. It was almost out of the viewfinder of the camera. So I went down the CBS and developed the photograph, and I tucked it in my pocket that night at the show. And there was approximately 40 people there. And the psychic medium said, a guy just walked in the room, and everyone's looking around. We couldn't see it, but you know, psychics can see the other side. She said a guy just walked in. He was in a high impact accident. His name begins with a J or a soft G. And I raised my hand. I said, my friend Joe was supposed to be here. And I explained that he was killed by a train. She goes, okay, let me get some more information. He's here with an older woman and a younger girl. And I know that his mother and sister had passed before him. And she says, okay, this is him. This is Joe. He's said he's okay, and he's telling me to tell you to look in one of your pictures in the bottom right-hand corner because you took a picture of him earlier in the day. So that was what knocked me down in the hallway, and I got the picture of the large purple orb in the bottom right-hand corner of the picture, which was pretty I mean, he came to the show, but not in the way that he wanted to.
I see. I see. Now, delving into the history of the property, how important would you say it is to delve into the history of these places that you are investigating?
Well, you have to, it's very important because you have to know the history of the location to try to figure out the reason or the reasons for the hauntings. So that chapter deals with the history of the property going back to 1848. And then there was originally a house there, but the whole block was destroyed by fire in a major conflagration in 1886. And then the Masonic building was built several years later in 1892. And it's the whole history of the building up until the current day.
I see. Okay, an evening to die for.
That was quite an evening to die for. That was a murder mystery dinner with 14 vaudeville acts. And
Oh, really?
in between, they had a buffet, which was catered by one of Laurie's friends, who was a great cook. Bridegewater State College Ensemble Theater were the actors. And it was, again, 14 different acts with mimes and musical notes. And at the beginning of the show, we were in the room, the show was going on, we heard screams coming from the hallway, and the girls were across the hall in an old dining hall using that as a dressing room. So the M.A.P.S team members all made eye contact, and we went out to the hallway, and the girls were running out of the room. They turned the light off and slammed the door, and they said, "We're not going in there the rest of the night. There's a creepy guy standing down in the corner." So when we heard that, we knew it wasn't of the physical sense. We went into the kitchen where there's a set of double swinging doors into the room. One was propped open. We snapped some pictures into the room, and there was a large orb down in the corner in front of the closet where the girls said they had seen this creepy figure. But one of our other friends snuck down to the basement that night during this presentation and did a little EVP session, and he played it for us after the show when everyone left, and you can hear the music and the girls singing. And in the old horror movies with Boris Karloff, when they bite, before the vampire bites your neck, they make that hissing noise.
Yes, yeah.
You can hear the hissing noise coming from a distance, real faint, and then it gets right up on top of the EVP recorder, and it says, "Get out," in a pretty creepy voice.
Yeah.
So the building's had a lot of activity over the years, and it still does to this current day.
Yes, and of course, getting back to the Masonic block, the investigation.
Very creepy.
Yes, I would imagine.
Very creepy. We had a psychic medium with us. When we go on the investigations, Laurie Parker's the caseworker. Her husband, Paul Coletti, is the equipment coordinator, who are here with me in the studio. I usually do the research on the properties, and I walk with the psychic and the cameraman. So if she comes up with something that I found in my research, we can validate it on film. So we broke up throughout the building into small groups. We started up in the attic, which was pretty creepy. There was a lot of dark shadow figures up there, and you could hear them rustling around. Another group was on the second floor in the dining room, which I mentioned previously, and the EMF detector, we just put all new batteries in. My sister's fiance, Rick, was using it, and the batteries just died as soon as he turned it on. So she took a photograph of him changing the batteries, and in the background, in the double doors, there's glass windows. You can see a black hooded figure looking through the window, which is also in the book. There's a few paranormal pictures there, but it was quite a creepy investigation, especially this walk-in closet that's in one of the shops. We went in, and the psychic says, "I don't like this wall, it's hiding something." And then she said, "They're mad at you. You discovered too many of their secrets." And I said, "What is their name?" And she goes, "I don't know." And she started getting all like flustered. And she, "Beelzebub, Beelzebub." And I said, "What is that?" And I didn't know what that meant at the time.
Right.
And our cameraman said, "Something just whispered Satan in my ear." So she ran out of the closet, and she said, "There's something standing behind you with horns and hooves." So when I turned and snapped the picture, there was a large landscape picture on the wall. There was a large face that had manifested in the picture. You can see it looking out of which is also in the book.
And do you think that has something to do with the Masonic history itself?
I really do, because I have a couple of postcards that I put in chapter number 5, and there is a picture of a goat with horns sitting in the worshipful master's chair, and it says, "I belong to all the lodges in the world."
Oh, wow.
So, yes, I do believe most of the hauntings in the building pertain to the Masonic but there are, again, a lot of energies left behind over the years from all the different, there was approximately 60 different fraternal organizations as well as businesses in the building.
Sounds like the law of invitation.
Yes.
Exactly. Now, no such thing as coincidence, something I believe as well.
That, a lot of bizarre things started happening once I started going to the buildings, to the building, excuse me. We got a lot of paranormal things in our photographs. I would go into work. I worked at an electrical company, and I was showing all my coworkers the pictures, and everyone was really into the photos and the stories. And one night we were there was a loud bang, and all the lights in the place went out. The exit signs, the emergency, I have never seen it so dark in my life. And a couple of my coworkers yelled out, "Wayne, your friends are following you from the building." And then after a couple of minutes, the lights came back on, but all kinds of weird things started happening once I started going to the building.
I see, wow. So no such thing as coincidence. Now, the East Bridgewater Historic Ghost Tour, which you are the proprietor of.
The narrator. It's a lot of work done by a lot of our characters. Lori Parker sponsors the tour. This year will be our 13th year.
Beautiful pictures of the ghost tours and everything like that. And you dress all up, of course.
Yes, as a narrator.
From Salem and everything. And,
yes.
Yeah, and you've got a great voice for it, too.
I lose it, though, during the tour.
I would imagine
I
after
talk
a
too
while.
much.
Well, we got Miss Borden there, Miss Lizzie there.
We actually have one of Lizzie Borden's lawyers buried in the cemetery we go through.
Oh, that's
so
right, yeah.
Paul Coletti plays Lizzie Borden's lawyer, Arthur Sherman Phillips, whose grave we go to.
Uh-huh.
And we also have a gentleman that went down on the Titanic, so we have a violinist at that grave.
Uh-huh.
But
really?
It's a well put together production by all involved. It's a lot of work, and we all have fun doing it.
Yeah. Yep. The last song on the Titanic, "Nearer My God to Thee."
We have a gentleman, he just joined us this year on the tour. He's 15, but he plays the violin like he's been playing for years. He actually plays that song at Millet's grave.
Really?
And we have a reproduction newspaper of the Boston Globe from the Titanic sinking, which we prop up, and it says on the stone, went down on the Titanic. And when the crowd walks up, he starts playing as we're coming to the grave in the dark, and everyone acts like they're at the actual burial. It's an emotional moment on the tour.
I don't think I could keep a dry eye in
It's
a moment
pretty,
like that.
it's pretty tough.
Wow. Here's a nice, neat picture of you there.
From darkness to light.
From darkness to light, yeah. Wow, looks like a really, really enjoyable occasion. Now, when you're on the tour, you do get some activity as well, right?
We've had a lot of things actually happen on the tour. 2 years ago on the tour, in the back room, which we set up as a morgue, where the undertakers were, Lori has a religious statue on a table. Mm-hmm. And on the last night of the tour, we're walking out, no one was near the table. There was a loud bang, and people were turning and looking to see what it was, and we couldn't see anything, so we continued with the tour. When we got back to the shop, that statue was actually 3 feet away from the table,
Really?
on the ground with the head off, like something slapped it off the table, because you jumped up and down and the statue wouldn't even move, and it should have fell straight forward. It went the other way.
So sometimes special effects are provided for you, right?
Exactly. And twice on the tour, the cloak I wear has a piece with 2 buttons on it that keeps it together. Twice that has been pulled away from my throat, and I
While you're
can
wearing
feel
it?
Yes, and one we have on, somebody recorded it, and the buttons popped off and the cloak fell on the ground.
Oh, my goodness.
So things happen here and there along the tour.
Yes.
Which keeps it interesting.
Right. Now, the big move, what is that?
Lori, actually, this photo was taken in the front window of her old shop at 12 West Union Street. Mm-hmm. And then the gentleman at number 16 had an antique store, and he was moving, so she moved over into a bigger shop. So that's just a little bit about the moving and some, again, paranormal things that happened during the move to the other shop.
Oh, my goodness. What about the keys?
The keys was when Lori let my sister, her fiance, and myself go inside and start doing internal investigations. We started by taking pictures through the front windows, and you've seen some at the show. We came to one of your shows back in 2007. It showed a bunch of faces looking out of the mirrors, and then in the third photo, one of them turned red, and we kind of panicked on that. But that's about when she gave us the keys, and we got to start going inside and doing internal investigations.
I see. Now, of course, a lot of fun and enjoyment too, but I think a lot of people don't realize the potential danger that goes into this. And you, of course, and your team, you've been in some potentially very dangerous situations.
Correct.
Do you want to speak a little about that, the dangers involved?
Well, things can get attached to you, I know that for sure. And we work with a psychic medium, and on 2 of our investigations, there was such negative energy, we actually had to call in your team to come and take care of that end of it, because we don't deal with the type of demonic things that you professionally deal with your team, with Carl and Sandra. So we've had some investigations we went into that were negative, and if we go in, we'll get a massive headache or a stomach ache, but once you get away from that area, you're fine.
What about someone who is sensitive, very psychic or sensitive? They can get overwhelmed?
Like the psychic that we had in the walk-in closet, she was just totally like, I've never seen her in that state before. I mean, she ran from the closet, and I don't like that, and she explained about that thing with the horns and hooves. Yeah, we've seen that on cases we've been on where somebody who's sensitive and psychic, they'll go into a certain closet or a certain space, and they just have to get out of there. They get overwhelmed. Well, luckily we have your team that we know of, so if we do run into any more of those situations, like I said, we have someone to call on, because you deal with that in a professional way and you understand it a lot better than a regular paranormal team. Right. And you do go into private homes as well. Yes. Of course, you go into many private homes. People, they do contact you. They're having disturbances. How do you decide if it's warranted to actually go to the premises and conduct an investigation? Lori Parker, who was our case manager, takes all the information, and then we discuss it amongst ourselves whether it would be worth it to go to these locations. And some you can tell just by, the stuff that they're telling you, that it's not. Right. A lot of people will just want you to go to their house so they can say they've had a paranormal team there. Right. But most of the places, we've had, I think, 2 that we turned down, but most of the people that call us, we have gone in and done an investigation. And some don't want the things out of the house, they just want to know what's there, right. Or what's going on there. I'm sure you have helped a lot of people too. That have nowhere else to turn. And done blessings on houses, we've done saging, and then of course the 2 with you had to do a exorcism on the properties because of the negative energy there, which was very interesting to watch. Yes. So glad to work with you always. Very glad to work with you. You as well. Now, what first motivated you to go into this field? I mean, did you feel a calling, or was it just an interest, or what was it? Well, after Lori told me the story about the 50 faces pressed up against the window looking out, I just became totally obsessed with the building, and I just wanted to know more and more. It was like the building's like a giant magnet, and it draws people to it, believe it or not. So that's what got my attention, because whoever heard of something like that, taking a picture and then there's ghostly faces pressed up against the window. Doesn't happen every day. No, so I just became obsessed with the building and just kept digging deeper and deeper into the history to try to figure out why. And here we are today. Yeah, speaking of pictures, what kind of basic equipment do you use when you go on one of these investigations? I just bring an EVP recorder and a camera. I don't use any of the fancy equipment. You don't have to do thermal imaging and break the bank and all these things? No, we do have Paul Coletti, our equipment manager. He does have infrared cameras, and we have EMF detectors and the voice box, which some of them are a lot better than others. Right. But we have basic equipment. We don't have all this real expensive stuff because you don't need that. Now, it's so wonderful that you've written this book because,
bringing awareness to people of this area and the Massachusetts Bay area and so forth. Is that what you cover, just Massachusetts, or do you travel out of state?
We've been to a couple of places out of state. Lori and Paul went to a place in Connecticut. I actually went to Jamaica.
I noticed there's a picture of the wedding in Jamaica.
Do an investigation, but I went to Rose Hall, which is a haunted plantation. It's supposed to be one of the most haunted places in the Western Hemisphere, and we did go there in the daytime and at night through, and you can fail things, but again, we didn't do an investigation there, but we did venture through these places. So we do go out of Massachusetts.
Okay, now what's ahead for you? Any more books coming up? Going to do a sequel?
I have enough chapters to do a second one, but I got to wait till this one. We're halfway through with this one, so once that's done, then we'll start on another one in the East Bridgewater area, all our East Bridgewater investigations.
All right. Now, if somebody requests your services, how would they get in touch with you?
M.A.P.S.paranormalteam.com is our website. You can go on and you can send a message, and Lori gets the messages, and then we again decide if there's warrant to go and conduct an investigation on a particular property.
Right. Do you ever do phone consultations? I do sometimes if it's really out of state sometimes.
No, we haven't really done any. I mean, people have called and talked to Lori, and she talks to them, but nothing. We don't usually get phone consultations. Usually if someone calls, they want us to go out to the locations.
Right, and I'm sure you network too. If it's way out of state, somebody has a problem.
We have other people we can get in touch with, yes. Like, again, with your team, we've contacted you. So, yeah, we have other people that we can get in touch with.
Okay. Well, any I don't mean last words, but I mean, that sounds ominous, but any final statements you'd like to make or upcoming things you'd like to talk about?
We do have our tour coming up again. This will be our 13th year, and it's quite successful. Quite the tour, and we have a lot of people that go around to
bigger and bigger
tours.
Every year, right?
Yes, yeah, the crowds get larger, and we try to upgrade it each year. So this year we're going to be we go into one building on the tour. This year we'll be going to a second building, but it's not going to be on a nightly basis that we do the tour. It's going to be a few times during the tour. So we got a second haunted location we'll be going into.
And briefly, I wanted to ask you, do you have anything you do, like when you go onto one of these sites or an investigation or an intervention, to protect yourselves? Like
we usually do a prayer before we go in, and then after we leave the location, once we get outside, we do another prayer, and we have holy water. And so, yes, we do, because that's important after all the investigations, so things don't attach to you.
And you've been with us at Slater Mill as well.
Yes, we have. That was quite the tour, a big tour, actually, through a couple of buildings.
Yes.
That was an enjoyable tour, and actually one of Paul Coletti, who's here with us from the M.A.P.S team, actually got an EVP there in one of the buildings on the tour. That was a spectacular tour.
Right.
That was excellent.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Wayne, for coming on very graciously, giving us some of your time and sharing your book with us.
Thank you for having me.
And I hope you come back again. Will you do that?
We'd be glad to.
Okay.
And we're going to leave you with a copy of the book.
Thank you. That is appreciated. The book is Faces in the Window, East Bridgewater, Mass. by Mr. Wayne F. Nye. Thank you very much. It's an honor having you.
Thank you.
See you again soon.
Thank you.
Okay. God bless. Bye, everybody. We'll be back. We'll be back.